The real estate industry recently went through one of the biggest commission shakeups in history. Buyers agents were being asked to justify their value like never before. And most agents are not ready for that conversation. So today, Tammy and I are going to get uncomfortable and talk exactly about how we're all navigating this. What's working, what's failing, and what every agent in North Carolina needs to hear right now. All right, so joining us today is somebody I'm super happy to introduce that you're going to be seeing a lot on the channel, and that is Miss Tammy Fox. Tammy, welcome.
Thank you for having me today. I'm very excited to be talking about agents and things that we can do to improve our industry.
Right, so this channel, as you guys know, if you're watching this, you're probably also a realtor. You've probably seen the same changes and evolution in our industry that we have. Tammy, how many years have you done this?
8 years.
Okay, yeah. So, a lot changes just year by year. And on today's podcast, the topic that we want to talk about, which I think is very relevant in our industry right now, is all the recent changes with NAR and agency. Tell me from your perspective, because we've both been in the business for a while, and guys, comment below too as you're watching this, because we know that not all of us are in the same market, but if you're watching this, you may be in North Carolina, which, full transparency, that is primarily what our discussions will be about, because that's what we know about.
Yes.
And every state is different. So our perspective is North Carolina. Definitely chime in below if you're not from the same state, because you might have a completely different experience than us. And I think there's markets within markets.
Agreed,
Like,
there are.
There's statewide, and then there's localities within the state. And of course, we are in the Hickory real estate market. We, serve Piedmont all the way up to mountains. But, you might be watching this from the coast and be in a completely different circumstance. But in our case, tell me from your experience, was it October 2024? Whenever NAR made all those changes about compensation, and do you feel like it changed everything or changed nothing, or kind of both?
I think it enhanced my conversations with my buyers.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're more empowered now because they understand how we're paid.
Mm-hmm.
They understand everything's a negotiation, and we are not tied to one number.
Yeah.
And I think it really enhanced the relationship I have with my buyers, because they go in more confident with an offer, and they feel like they know what their bottom line is now.
Yeah. No, I think that's very valid. And, I think a lot of it has to do with the context of how you performed your business prior to the changes, because I think a lot of us did it this way from the beginning. I mean, in North Carolina, we had to have written buyer's agency before showing a property. So, the casual, just looking oral buyer's agency, that went away. I will say that was an adjustment. But if you truly did a buyer consultation before, well, you're doing it now. And if you were prepared to present your value and have honest conversations about compensation, well, then you're prepared now. So I feel like really good agents, it didn't derail anybody, to be honest. Don't you agree?
No, and I feel like it protects our time now, because we're going in knowing we've got a pre-qualified buyer. Mm-hmm. They know what the money is on the line, and we're not an Uber driver out there showing houses without having financial discussions with our clients.
Yeah, I think that's good. And, I think the big word around all of this was transparency. Now, I have mixed feelings about the MLS response to it, and the fact that we cannot communicate compensation in the MLS. Personally, I think that's less transparency, because now agents can kind of be very fluid with it. What if they offered one commission to one agent and another commission to another? I'm just saying, I feel like that opens the door to less transparency. And I definitely want to hear thoughts from other agents, because that's a discussion I feel like everybody needs to have. But what was alarming to me, and I don't know if you saw this too, but if you were a member of any realtor Facebook groups, just how polarizing this was and how misinformed people are of how to explain agency.
And that comes from agents who have not had training. Mm-hmm. They've not discovered how to have a conversation with a buyer.
Exactly.
And it all came down to conversations.
Yeah.
Are you ready to talk about commission? Yeah. Are you ready to talk about how you get paid?
Yeah.
And if you've not practiced that, you're practicing it on your clients, and that's not a good thing.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's a valid point. And, I have found that the discussion about the NAR changes was more noticeable to me on the listing presentation than the buyer presentation, because sellers were hearing things on the news about, I don't have to pay a buyer's agent anymore. And I was like, well, hold up, let me explain what really happened. Because that to me was just an opportunity to educate the consumer, which is always a constant battle in our industry. I feel like a lot of what we do is just educate and inform and advocate. But we were running into that a lot. Did you have sellers that suddenly thought, maybe I don't need to pay a buyer's agent? Or did that come up at listing appointments for you?
It absolutely came up. And we discussed what happens if you get no offers and you are not offering any compensation and you don't sell your house.
Yeah.
Your next goal is, and I would reiterate the goal, how do we get there? In this market, it is common that we are offering some compensation from the listing side. What are you comfortable with? And then we go into that discussion.
Yeah.
Because ultimately they have a goal to sell that house.
Yeah.
And my goal is for them to get to that point with the most money possible in their pocket.
Yeah. And it kind of makes you wonder, what were they told before? Because that was what was alarming to me, was that they ever thought they had to. You never had to. It would behoove you to. It was wise to, and it still is. But that's just the same, like that hasn't changed. So at least in our market, I would say 99 out of 100 times, the listing side does provide some sort of compensation baked in, if you will, to the list price. And that is helpful, because whether buyers want to admit it or not, it would affect possibly their ability to pursue your home. And so to have that built in allows us to sort of continue business as usual. And I think that was really the discussion that I had with so many sellers was, look, you never had to begin with. If you were ever told that you were responsible for the buyer's commission, well, that was a fault on our industry for not communicating that better. And I think that's where transparency came up. Was it ever fair to say it's free to use a buyer's agent? No, it was never okay to say that. People did say it.
Yes, they did.
And that confused the consumer. But the fact is we have two different roles in a transaction. The listing agent has their job and they're paid. And the buyer's agent has their job and they're paid. And they negotiate their fees separately. So, to have that broken down on the listing agreement as A plus B equals C, I think that maybe was a better way to explain it versus how it was before. And again, we're talking about North Carolina forms. I don't know what y'all's forms looks like in Georgia or Florida or California. But in our case, I felt like that was an improvement, and it got shorter, the listing agreement. Everything got a little shorter with the revisions. But I do feel like that was a discussion that needed to be had on the seller side, and it sort of forced you to do a buyer consultation.
It absolutely did. And we did not see equity change. A lot of people thought, well, home values are going to change because of the commission. It has not changed the values of the home.
Yeah, that's true. That early on, that was a discussion that people were having. And really, I get it. You kind of have to watch and see how things play out. But that hasn't been the case, because buyers and sellers still see compensation operating the same way, at least in our market.
Right.
I know there are some states in which you cannot bake it in or have it as part of the offer. It has to be separate. But the fact is it's a convenience for buyers, and it helps everybody accomplish the same goal. What you want to do as a listing agent and a buyer's agent is get to the closing table.
Exactly.
And to be able to do that and kind of carry on with business. I feel like it was like groundbreaking when it happened, but then nothing actually super changed other than more of a formal buyer process.
Yes, and I think that's made it better for our buyers.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree right now. I agree. I definitely think that to have a firm that trains you on how to communicate your value as a buyer's agent, and in North Carolina, we are a caveat emptor state, buyer beware, it serves you well to have an advocate, because everything's as is and you should know what you're buying. And I do think that if you're able to communicate your value as an agent to the consumer, that you really have nothing to worry about.
Right.
You know?
And it's not just about finding the house and going under contract.
Yeah.
There are so many steps that go into the process to protect that buyer from contract to close.
Absolutely.
And that's where we show our value as a buyer's agent.
Yeah.
We negotiate, we protect their bottom line and their best interest during that process. And we've not talked about that enough in our industry.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. And I also think, I saw an article when all this came out and it said the 3% commission era is dead. And I was like, what a dramatic way to like really falsely summarize what has always been negotiable and
Yes.
still is. Like, that's what kind of blows my mind. And I'll just kind of share, and you may have seen this too, because guys, comment below too, in your local market, is it typical? And I'm going to bring up something controversial because this gets people really riled up about commission and how it's divided. Is it typical in your market? And what is your position on this? And I'm sure you have strong feelings because everyone does, of commission split evenly. And I want to be careful how I phrase that because it's not split. You each have your own fee. That to me is like the big thing here. Do people get rubbed the wrong way if you get to the closing table and the listing side kept more? Like, you've seen some of that. What are your initial thoughts?
I have seen that. I've experienced it. And it makes me negotiate my fee better the next time. And I protect what I feel I'm worth with my buyer because they are separate fees.
Exactly. So whenever we've had that happen, and I truly feel like when you sit down with a seller and you discuss how much you want to pay the buy side, it's up to them. It's not up to you. If your fee is 3, if your fee is 2, if your fee is 1 or 3.5 on the listing side, negotiate that. What are you doing for that money? You may have more money to market the home with. That's a discussion about you and the seller because they are employing you to do a job. What's your fee for that? Okay, got it. Check. Now, do we want to offer something to the buyer's agent? That should have always been a question.
Absolutely.
It was assumed before, and it's still encouraged now. I do see absolute value in that. But what's going to attract a buyer's agent to the property? How do we encourage them to bring the buyer to the listing? It's usually some compensation. And, it may be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's always been negotiable. But what you offer, to me, the way the buyer's agent should look at it is, hey, thank you for that. If my fee is more than what's being offered, I'll get it from my buyer. I feel like a good agent should be able to communicate that and then not be like, you're not at the mercy of what the seller's offering you. You know what I'm saying? Like if you, in your case, share your experience. I know when I submit an offer, I tell the listing agent what my fee was with my buyer on my buyer's agency agreement. That's how I determine what I'm paid.
Exactly.
If it's 3, 3.5, 2, that's between me and my client. But if what they're offering is not enough to satisfy the obligation on that buyer's agency agreement, it affects my buyer because they either got to come out of pocket with it or we negotiate it into the offer. And that's the magic of the Form 220. So is that how you approach it too?
Absolutely.
Okay.
When I submit an offer, I attach whatever number matches my buyer agency. And it really brings back everything as a negotiation in this process.
Yes.
And it's up to the seller to respond to that.
Yeah.
And sometimes they may not have had an offer and they're like, well, I said I would pay a different fee. However, I've got this offer in hand and I'm willing to pay it.
Yeah. A lot of them will say, look, I'm not going to lose the deal over 0.5%.
Correct.
And sometimes that means that the buyer's agent ends up making more than the listing agent did. There's sometimes where we get to closing and I was paid less than the listing agent. I find that to be no reason to pitch a fit. Like I've seen some agents get really bent out of shape about it, but I'm like, I have no control over what you've worked out with your client. That's who's paying you. If you wanted more, you should have asked for more.
Absolutely.
And so I feel like part of it's when I see agents respond inappropriately to that, I feel like it's rooted in just a misunderstanding of how commission works and who's paying who. Because It's not what's offered. It's what you've negotiated prior to ever showing that house. That's how you determine what you get paid. And a good agent can communicate that, you know?
And I think that goes back to the training of our new agents and how to have those conversations.
Absolutely.
And protect what they feel their value is.
Yeah.
If we can discuss our value with our clients and we all understand it, we shouldn't have emotions at closing if
Yeah.
our numbers don't match.
Yeah. I guess to have an expectation is to, I think, insult how negotiable the entire transaction is. To have an expectation that I'm supposed to get X number, get that out of your head, because fixed commission was always wrong. It's still wrong. And if you've gone through pre-licensing, that should have been drilled into your head. So to be able to communicate that clearly and to behave professionally. And guys, if you're watching this and you're a new agent, consider this to your advantage, because this is all you've known. She and I have dealt with people in the industry, even ourselves, that adjustments require adjustment. And that sometimes is more challenging for some agents that have been in the business for a long time. And they have to say, hold up, I can't do verbal buyer's agency. I've never done a a buyer consultation. That's something now they have to learn. But if you're a new agent, this is all you've ever known. So congratulations. Like you have, I think, an edge, because this is your normal. And for some agents, it's a new normal, especially in markets where maybe there wasn't a formal buyer's agency. I mean, some of y'all were running around as seller sub-agents all the time. And North Carolina, buyer's agency was always a thing. So I feel like we especially haven't felt the impact like some other states have.
Yes, we were one of the few states that did have written buyer's agency. We didn't have as much clarity in the discussion of our compensation. We did have written agreements before we submitted offers.
Yeah.
And that set us apart from some of the other states where you didn't have that.
Yeah. And that kind of made this entire like industry changing thing like more like a little road bump for us. Like it was just sort of a reinforcing what really most of us were probably doing anyway. I mean, I feel like it was always wise to have some sort of, before you ask somebody to sign something, you should sit down and talk with them. They're employing you. Explain what your fee is. Explain how long the term's going to be. Explain what you're going to do for them. I think that was worthy of a discussion, and it really should have been in writing. It protects you too. I mean, so that you're not an Uber driver, Lord knows we spend a lot of time just riding around showing properties. We might as well have an agreement in place to protect. So I do think that the whole notion of the 3% buyer agent error being dead is kind of a misnomer. It never was just 3.
It was a sensational headline.
It was. Yeah. And gosh, I mean, people read that and then it confused the public, sadly.
It did confuse them, and it brought up a lot of emotions in the industry.
Yeah, it absolutely did. So what do you think has set agents apart, the ones that have been kind of tripped up by the changes versus the ones that are succeeding through the evolution of our industry? What do you think the attributes of an agent that's thriving in this market is doing versus those that are struggling?
The ones that I see thrive are the ones who are out there getting education. They're having discussions. They're making themselves better as an agent. The ones who are not thriving want to just keep things the same. They never want to change. They don't want to adapt to whatever is going on in the market. And I think that sets the agents who are succeeding apart from those who are status quo.
Yeah, I agree. I've always said like one of the best attributes that a successful real estate agent can have is to be adaptable, because our job is over and under and around and finding creative, cooperative ways to get to the finish line through, a pretty complicated process that requires a lot of different professionals that all do well at their job, that communicate well, and hopefully collaborate. And hopefully, with the same goal, especially from a buyer agent perspective, has kind of been what we're talking about today. Everybody's on the same team and they're all working for that buyer. And that's why I love whenever we first go under contract, I send like a big, happy email saying, okay, gang, attorneys, lenders, home inspector, here's what we're going to do. We all work for the Smith family. let's get them to closing and let's all work together, lock arms, and protect them through this journey. Help them be informed, supported, just check everything, because there's plenty of things that can spring up and go wrong. So, I do think buyer's agent advocacy is more important than ever, especially in a state where, sellers can say what they want or they can say nothing if they want. So we kind of have to roll our sleeves up and look under the hood and know what's going on and have good lenders and different people in your corner. Do you think that was a good change or like, not to oversimplify it, but from your perspective, you feel like it was a good shift or a bad shift for our industry?
I think it was a good shift because it brought communication, clarity, transparency to our buyers. It also enabled us to talk more clearly with sellers.
Yeah.
And I think they feel more empowered with information about how does everybody get paid? What does my bottom line look like? In the end, we want everybody to feel like a winner at the closing table. There's nothing worse than feeling like you represented the party who feels like they were taken advantage of.
Yeah.
And I think our clarity and communication have improved because of this change.
Yeah, I agree. And I think empower is a good word for it, because I think in any business relationship, both parties need to feel like they won. And for a buyer, you want to know that you've got a strong agent in your corner that's going to do their job. And from a buyer's agent perspective, you want to know you're being compensated fairly. And I think it's okay and favorable, even these changes, for the purpose from an agent perspective, for you guys watching, set your fee. Like, what do you want to be paid? What do you feel like it requires? It really should always be an independent, analysis of that client, that transaction, what is required, what do they need. We don't have set commission. This only further allows us to explore what that looks like. I can't think of a time that we've ever seen more variation in commissions offered. And I think that's healthy. I mean, I think that's a sign of a healthy industry of agents that are competing in the marketplace that all offer different things for different fees. And to be fair, I think from a listing agent perspective, more than ever is expected. I mean, it used to be you put a sign up and it goes in the MLS book, and you take a picture and, now we got drones flying around and you got to be a social marketing guru and, and yeah, I mean, you've experienced it too. Buyers, some of them buy quickly and some of them take years.
They do take years. And sometimes we look at many homes and they self-discover that what they thought was their dream home really wasn't.
Yeah.
And we sometimes recalibrate their searches to meet what they're seeing in our market that's available and what they really want.
Yeah.
And that is a big part of working with the buyer, is identifying what their goal is.
Yeah.
What kind of home do they want to live in?
Yeah. And I think it's ironic that inevitably what they end up in is actually nothing like what they thought they wanted. And you get kind of a front row seat of the evolution of their wants and needs, maybe not changing, but revealing. Just because sometimes you have to see what you don't want before you know what you do want.
Absolutely.
And that takes time. And to have, I feel like you can't be a buyer's agent and be somebody who's just transactional. Like you care about your client and you're on a journey with them and you're navigating landmines. I've always had this analogy of them like jumping on your back and you're like running through the trenches and you're like, no, low appraisal, no, and like navigating all these tricky things. And half of the buyers you put out, they don't know about. That's our job, to stay calm and to solve problems and to head things off before they occur.
Exactly. And often the first house is the stepping stone house. And it's the second house that's the dream house.
Yeah.
And they just have to understand it's a process that we don't always start at the finish line. Mm-hmm. We start at the start and we work our way to that goal.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that there's a lot to be said for the structure that the NAR changes have encouraged us to fall into, that I think should have always been there to begin with. Especially first-time buyers, they need to know the process up front. It helps prevent an emotional reaction later when they're stressed and they're making a big purchase and they're a little nervous, and then somebody's dad shows up and does the home inspection, and it's a little scary. And so I feel like having the discussion with a buyer up front, discussing compensation, discussing what to expect in the process before you get emotionally attached to a house, or before you've put down a deposit and you find out that maybe there's something that you don't want to proceed with the house. Like, it's good to have those discussions, because I feel like if you just set proper expectations, you can avoid so many issues.
I agree. I agree. Yeah. And my buyer consultation includes talking about inspections, costs, and the what ifs.
Yes.
They may find a house that has a septic tank, and that's going to be another expense to have an inspection. You don't want to buy a house and not inspect your septic.
Yeah.
They have to know, what's my outlay during the process, not just what am I going to bring to closing, what am I going to pay for along the way? And we discuss those if-when situations.
Exactly. So just having that information, it all should have been discussed prior to any of these changes, but now it gives us an opportunity to say, hey, hold up, let's not get the cart before the horse. Let me sit down and talk with you about what this journey is going to be like, how I want to help guide you through this, because you're the main character, you're the client. We're the guide, right? We're here to help and support and educate and protect. And to sit down and start the conversation that way, I feel like if there's one most positive thing that's come out of these changes, it's given more structure to that, to the buyer experience, which I think the buyer deserved all along. And I also feel like, if anything, it empowered buyers' agents to stand by their value and to determine what they're paid at closing, versus just being at the mercy of what the seller felt like paying you. It's not that was ever the case, but it has shown a light on the fact that it doesn't have to be that way. You can submit a 220 and say, well, my fee for this buyer was $3. Thank you for offering 2 of it. But rather than my buyer bring that extra 1% to closing, they're asking that with this offer, which is a good offer, would you consider covering that for them? A concession, if you will, and all of that can be negotiated. So don't ever be disappointed by what you get at the closing table. It really wasn't up to the seller. It was up to you. And if you do your job well, you have complete control over that. And I do think, don't you think buyers ultimately, once they understand the process, they absolutely see the value in, while buyers agents aren't free, it's worth the fee to have advocacy, especially in North Carolina.
It is definitely worth the fee to have that. I'll share a quick story if that's okay.
Yes, please.
Last year, one of my buyers purchased from a for sale by owner. And through that process, we negotiated heavily on some repairs that came up during our inspections. This year, when he bought his new investment property and had it ready, he called me to list it. He told me he wanted me on his side and not the other side of the table, because I was such a shrewd negotiator during that entire process.
That's a compliment. That's a big compliment.
And he saw the value in what I brought as a buyer's agent, and he wanted that for his side of a listing. So to me, that shows that it's recognized also by the other side when a buyer's agent knows their value, can communicate and go through negotiations through a process.
Yeah.
And they realize there are strong agents out there that are better in their corner than the other side of the table.
Absolutely. They said, we want her on our side, because she got us good on the other side.
Yes, I did.
And, that's your job. I mean, that's, so being broker in charge of a company, when an agent calls me and they start into a story about, they just start right into what they're going through, what they need help with, a question, I first say, who do you represent? Because that changes everything. Who are we advocating for? Because we're always in someone's corner, right? If you're a dual agent, you're a referee, okay? But if you are an agent of a client, you're advocating. And if you're doing your job right, you should sort of offset your fee. Because I feel like, same with the seller. We explain this all the time for sub-by owners. You can get more for the home. Even though you're paying a commission, you'll still net more, statistically speaking, because you're casting a wider net, you're marketing it more beautifully. And it's on our dime. We're the ones spending the money on the photography. So don't, let us do that. It's what we do. But yeah, I love that story. That is a very good example of you showing your value just in a transaction and what they felt like being on the opposite side of you.
Yes.
And they're like, no, she needs to be in my corner this time. That's a great compliment. That's a great way to look at it. But yeah, I think if anything, if you're a new agent and you're watching this, I would just encourage you to, as Tammy said, pursue relentlessly education. You know, Adriano has said it on this channel before. The more you know, the more you make. Know what you're doing. It allows you to reaffirm your value to your clients because you should want to offer more to your clients. B, it, I think, gives you more confidence in a transaction, and what agent doesn't want to operate their business confidently? If you're a new licensee and you might have found us on YouTube watching this, if you feel like you don't know everything, well, join the club. Everybody starts out feeling that way, and that's okay. But surround yourself with people that don't just talk about, how bad the industry is or things are changing or we don't like. No, just listen, lean into it, make yourself better and set yourself apart. And there's a way to embrace changes in the industry that help us all do better together. And those are the agents that are going to make it, I think. Don't you? I mean, keeping a positive attitude.
Absolutely. Being positive and adaptable to the changes is going to strengthen you. You will make more money because you're going to represent more people.
Absolutely. And you know what? The agents that can't evolve through market shifts like this, they won't make it. And frankly, that's okay. That's more business for the rest of us who are like, you know what? We're going to roll with the punches. We're not going to be negative about things that we disagree with in the market or whatever. I mean, we're all in the same market. Just do what you do and do it well. Serve your clients. We say it all the time, like the less you think about the money, the more you'll have. Just focus on service, not commission. And so don't get too tied up on NAR changes and commission and who got paid what. Just focus on doing the best job you possibly can. And there will never be a buyer that will be opposed to you being compensated well for that. Because I think by the end of the transaction, they know how hard you've worked for them. And in your case, even when you're on the opposite side of the transaction, they come back to you and say, help me.
They do. Yeah. And the highest compliment from any buyer is to refer me to another buyer later on because they were so pleased with how I represented them and protected their best interests.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the highest compliment for me.
Yes. It's all about the long game. And if you are watching this and you're an agent, don't forget that. Like, don't look at each transaction as the last deal you're going to have. Like, think about the long-term relationship. There's sometimes that we take a beating on commission because it's not about that one sale. It's about helping that person out and being somebody they would want to work with again in the future because it's not a one and done thing. Like, we want a long-term relationship where we can serve them and their whole family and all the homes that they buy later, their, recommendations from friends. Like, that's what this business is based on. So, I feel like, just kind of to wrap it up, I mean, from the perspective of the NAR changes and everything that's happened in the last year or two, just don't lose sight that that's really not the main focus anyway. And if you're doing your job correctly, it really probably didn't change much for you. Don't you agree?
I agree completely.
Yeah. If this conversation hits close to home, share this episode with one agent who needs to hear it. And if you're in North Carolina and want to be in a room with people having these kind of conversations every day, check out True North Realty. Links are in the description below. We'll see you next week.